Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome to Books My Quiet Friends. Today I will be bringing you my April wrap-up. So I did things in a little bit of a different order this month. I did my TBR first with the jars, and now I'm doing my wrap-up because I wanted to give myself some time to finish up some books, even though it was only one. So I'm going to start out today with the physical books that I read this month. The first book I read this month was The Winter's Kiss by Mary Rutowski. It is the third book in the Winter's Curse trilogy, and I really enjoyed the series overall. I think the author does a very good job of showing political drama as well as getting characters that you really love, an action-packed, interesting world. I really thought overall it was a great series and I would recommend it to any fantasy lover. I do remember reading this book and thinking that the first half was going pretty slow, that I was waiting for more to happen, and while it is a thick book, I don't think it needed to be quite so drawn out in the beginning. But still good, 4.5 out of 5 stars. The second book or manga I read this month was Sailor Moon Volume 2. I originally bought the first book thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be so nostalgic of my childhood. And as I read this book, I really remembered that this is a lot less childish than I thought it was. I think that this book really shows a different side of Sailor Moon with romance and everything else. You do get that in the first book, but this one's a lot more put together and coherent for a reader. And I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next physical book I read this month was Like a River Glorious by Ray Carson. This is the second book in the Gold Seer trilogy, and I gave it 4 or 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It's very pretty and beautiful as I stare at the back while I'm talking to you. I thought that this really took a sad, tragic turn for some of our characters, which makes sense based on the setting and the time period, and it is a historical fantasy / fiction. But I will say that the beginning for this one too just seemed to kind of drag on for me. I was waiting for something to happen to really propel the story forward. And it did, for sure. I'm interested to see where the third book goes and which characters we're going to be following through with, as some of our main characters have changed. And the last book I finished this month was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This cover is beautiful, and I bought it at Costco just because of the cover, and I'd heard people say they were going to get into it. It is a historical adult fiction about Mary Larie, who lives in Paris during the occupation by the Germans in World War II, and Warner, who is in Germany during this time. And it really follows in between the years of Germany escalating into World War II, as well as the end of World War II with the future, as well as all the way to 2016, I think. There's some blurbs. It is very time jumpy, so if you have trouble with that, I think that this might not be the book for you, but the characters really capture you and it keeps you interested even though you are going from 1930 to 1944 to 2017 or 2016 where it ends. I really do think that this book is something that everyone should read if you are a fan of historical fiction. The next 2 books I'll be talking about are 2 books I got from my library. As I do not own them, I will be showing you pictures. So the first book I read from my library this month was The Hostel Hospital, and that is the 8th book in the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I really thought that this series has taken a really great turn. It's really turned more into a young adult, less of a middle grade. I'm more interested in our characters and our villain, and I'm finding him progressively more evil. I think that Lemony Snicket does a great job of putting together his life as well as the life of the characters we're reading about, and it keeps you entertained and interested all the way along. The next book I picked up from the library was The Carnivorous Carnival. So this is the 9th book, I do believe. Yes, the 9th book in a series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket once again. And this one is by far my favorite book so far I've read in the series. It's very adult, it takes a very strange turn, things get a lot more graphic, things get a lot more interesting for the reader if you're older. And I think after this, I'm probably going to speed through the next 4 books. It's hard to believe that it's already coming to a close, but I'm excited to see what's going to happen. The last 2 books I completed this month were on audiobook. The first one was The White Rose by Amy Ewing. It is an audiobook based on the Lone City trilogy. It follows our main character Violet Lasting as she is a surrogate in a world where the royalty cannot have their own children. I can't really say much about what this one's about as it is the sequel to the first book, but I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was good, but I thought that there were parts that were problematic for sure. I remember thinking that the name choices were getting stranger and stranger, which if you've read the first book, you've got to think like, oh, it can't get much weirder. It does. It definitely does. I also remember being very interested in the backstory of some of our characters. We get a backstory for Raven, we get a backstory for Violet, we get more of a backstory for Ash, and not so much for Garnet, but I do believe there's a novella for him. So it's very interesting to see where these characters kind of come from and why they made the choices in their life that they did. The last audiobook that I listened to this month was The Black Key by Amy Ewing, and that is the final book in the Lone City trilogy slash series. I really thought it was interesting, but it did not throw me over the top. The first half I enjoyed. I was okay with. I kind of knew where we were going anyways. It was very predictable. Then it got very corny and cheesy near the end. There was a lot of yelling and strange things going on, which I kind of anticipated, but not to the extent that the author used. And as I mentioned before, the name choices just did not do justice to the series. I really thought that the author could have tried harder instead of just throwing them in there based on people's appearance. I also really remember thinking that it kind of seemed like she was throwing together all of the last stuff at once, just kind of trying to tie it up and be like, oh, it's due then or whatever, or I don't know what to do with these characters. Let's just tie it up real quick, we're done. I was not interested in it. I don't think I would read any more of her writing. Maybe in the future, you never know, she might just be beginning or starting out, and who am I to talk? I don't write. But it just was not the series for me, unfortunately. If you were just starting getting into dystopian, I could really see someone being interested in this series. The last book I'll be talking about today is one that I'm currently reading, and that's Replica by Lauren Oliver. Many people probably already know this, but there's 2 stories in this book. We have Lyra and Gemma. This is without the dust jacket on. The author suggests that if you alternate chapters, it's a more interesting story. So far, I'm enjoying it. It's not blowing me out of the water. I think the concept's very interesting, which is keeping me going. But other than that, it's not anything that I haven't really thought about before, because I am very interested in the subject matter. I don't want to spoil anything for you. So I will finish this book hopefully by the end of next month. And if I don't, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but this should be done by next month, and I will be able to give you a more complete overall look at what I thought then.